There is no greater feeling in a TCG than creating a deck from scratch that no one has a clue about, and then you absolutely stomping the metagame with it. And here I'm going to show you sometimes in the Pokemon TCG when that exact same thing has happened. When previously bulk cards that were next to worthless suddenly became tier 1 archetypes overnight, including one example of a tier 1 deck that I made my very self. This seemingly innocent Donphan was released all the way back in 2013 outside of Japan in the Plasma Storm expansion. Plasma Storm was full of heavy hitters like Lugia EX, Cobalion EX, as well as some massive trainer cards like Colress and Hypnotoxic Laser, and Dowsing Machine too. It's not hard to see why this lowly little Donphan slipped through the net. Spinning Turn looked okay as a strafe option, I guess, spinning into Safeguard Sigilift to protect yourself from damage from EX Pokemon. However, that 20 damage was just way too low for it to ever be taken seriously, and Donphan unfortunately got stashed into everyone's bulk piles. Until 2014, when Phantom Forces came out and suddenly Donphan gained all the tools it needed to become an absolute powerhouse. You see, between Plasma Storm and Phantom Forces, Furious Fist released, and this seemingly solved a lot of Donphan's problems, but not quite all of them. You see, Furious Fist had a card called Strong Energy, which in my opinion is in contention for being the strongest special energy card ever printed, if you pardon the pun. Strong Energy boosted the damage of fighting types it was attached to by 20, so this now made Spinning Turn do 40 damage instead of 20. Combo that with Muscle Band for an extra 20, and even Fighting Stadium for an extra 20 to EXs, and all of a sudden this one prize uncommon card was swinging for 80 damage for 1 energy, and switching out of the active too. Karina was perfect for this deck since it let you search out a fighting Pokemon and an item card too. This would make streaming Donphans very easy, and let you pluck out items like Computer Search or your tool cards like Muscle Band, Silver Bangle, or even Focus Sash, the latter of which was a new tool card that when it was attached to a fighting type Pokemon with full HP, gave it a sturdy like effect. So if the fighting type it was attached to would go from full HP all the way to KO'd in one attack, Focus Sash would activate and leave the Pokemon it was attached to on 10 HP, making Donphan really hard to deal with. And while this was all very strong, and don't get it twisted, it really was, the problem of what to strafe into was still around. Phantom Forces one set later seemed to change that in a major way. Phantom Forces first introduced Robo Substitute. It was an item card that you could play as a Pokemon. It had 30 HP and it couldn't retreat, but it didn't give up a prize card if it got KO'd. This essentially gave Donphan 4 free turns a game, since the opponent would sometimes be forced to attack into the Robo Substitutes. All of a sudden these Spinning Turns were now doing 80 damage and starting to look rather deadly when you consider you wasn't even taking prize cards when you were attacking. It doesn't stop there though, because Wobbuffet was in Phantom Forces too. Wobbuffet had the Bide Barricade ability, which means when it was in the active, it turns off all non-psychic Pokemon's abilities. This could stop certain decks right there in their tracks, like Bronzong decks for example, since the whole deck strategy was built around using Bronzong's ability. Believe it or not, there were even more options to strafe into though, like Trevenant, which had the Forest Curse ability, which would prevent your opponent from playing item cards when it's in the active. This variation of the strategy actually got top 8 at UK Nationals that year, but that did strafe with Gengar EX's Dark Corridor instead. Pyrewall could even be used, which prevented all damage done to it from basic Pokemon, which covered a scarily large amount of the metagame, like Yveltal decks, Night March decks, and Plasma variants too. Donphan was on such a high power level now with all these buffs, it actually got 2 at the 2015 World Championship, with Simon Darude getting top 8 with the deck as well. Not bad for an uncommon card that once cost 2 pence, eh? And if you stick around to the end of the video, you can possibly win this box of Dragon Shields and this playmat too. Good luck. Trevenant and Dusknoir GX at one time was considered an absolute joke. It was only available in English via the Pale Moon GX box, meaning we missed out on the full art variant, alternate art variant, and the rainbow variant too. Which was fine, because no one really needed Trevenant for competitive play. This was set to change eventually though. Night Watch was Trevenant's attack. For 3 energy, it did 150 damage and shuffled in 2 cards randomly from your opponent's hand. It was a pretty scary attack that could get out of hand rather quickly. if used multiple times. But in 2019, the format lacked many ways to lower your opponent's hand size via supporters, so hand lock wasn't really possible. Pale Moon GX was an interesting attack. For 2 energy, you would auto KO your opponent's active if it stayed in the active spot coming back into your turn. And if you had a 3rd energy attached, you would discard all energy from your opponent's active too. If this effect ever went through, it felt like you were cheating all things considered, because decks back then played a multitude of switching cards like Melolana, Augur's Hala for Floatstone, and Tag Call Search both of them as well. Despite all that though, this card saw 0 play immediately. When Cosmic Eclipse came out though and ADP started to run amok, Trevnar did start to see some niche play. You see, after ADP would use Alter Creation on turn 2, a sneaky Malamar player, like me, realised you could use Trevnar's GX attack, Pale Moon, to rip all those energies off the ADP, effectively denying the ADP player Ultimate Ray for the rest of the game. And since this was before Metal Sorcerization V was in the format, this pretty much wrapped the game up for you, since they were stuck attaching 1 energy a turn. Although to be honest, this wasn't a widely known or played tech card for Malamar back in 2019, keeping Trevnar's demand quite low. This was all set to change 3 years later though, when Chilling Reign was set to release. Shadow Rider Color X VMAX was set to make things a little bit freaky, since with its Underworld Door ability, you could attach a Psychic Energy from your hand to one of your bench Psychic Pokemon, and then draw 2 cards. This is an absolutely downright silly form of energy acceleration, allowing you to draw cards and accelerate energy at the same time. Max Guys also provided solid nuke options too, if you really got to work, since it would do 10 plus 30 for each Psychic Energy attached to all your Pokemon. This meant it was now very easy to set up a Trevnar, but it wasn't Shadow Rider that made Trevnar suddenly tier 1. It was a combination of 3 other cards. The first one was Gengar Mimikyu GX. Gengar Mimikyu GX's attack, Horror House, was absolutely downright silly. If you had 1 Psychic Energy attached, you could prevent your opponent from playing any cards from their hand next turn, effectively making them skip a turn almost. If you had 2 Psychic Energy attached, both players could now draw up to 8 cards in their hand. Using this on turn 1 or 2 was so crippling for your opponent, since their setup would be heavily hampered. And if they drew up to 8, you could even pop a cheeky Poltergeist in, which would do 50 for each trainer card in your opponent's hand. This, however, wasn't the go-to strategy. Instead, what you would try and do is fire off Armani, reducing your opponent's hand down to 4, then get a Trevnar rolling with 3 energy, ready to attack. But before you would attack, you would put a Path to the Peak in play. Path to the Peak was a new stadium card that turned off all abilities from Pokemon that had a rule box. So this included V and GX Pokemon too. But yeah, that would turn off your own Shadow Riders though, right? You see it would, but their work was done now, since your Trevnar was ready to attack and you could use Night Watch to reduce your opponent's hand down to 2 cards, hit 150 damage, and now with Path to the Peak in play, you would turn off any Crobat or Eldegoss outs for example. And from there, most games would end with Trevnar swinging for 150 every turn and eventually reducing your opponent's hand completely down to 0 and KOing your opponent's whole board uncontested. Honestly, it was a scary deck to deal with and it got out of hand. Absolutely horrible times. But I've saved the best till last now, because this is a card I can confidently say I was the driving force why this card became a focal point of a tier 1 deck. This deck even got 3rd place at the 2020 Limitless Invitational, which was the most prestigious event of the year. Now, if you want the full backstory to this, you're going to have to watch my Pokemon TCG Butterfly Effect video. But the TLDR is, I really like Jirachi Prism because of its ability name Wish Upon a Star. It would activate if you took Jirachi as a face down prize card. You could then put it on your bench if you did, and then take an extra prize card. I would play it for funsies in ADP, so I could take 5 prize cards after KOing tag teams, effectively taking 2 extra prize cards that turn. As fun as it was though, it wasn't very reliable, since you had no way to get Jirachi Prism into the prizes consistently. Although when Sword and Shield released, I instantly saw a new combo that would make Jirachi Prism very easy to use, making for some silly turns. Basically, you would use Oranguru's Primate Wisdom ability to swap the top card of your deck with a card in your hand. Obviously, we would put Jirachi Prism to the top of our deck. Then we would use Mr. Mime from Detective Pikachu to swap the top card from our deck with one of our prize cards. Meaning, not only would we have Jirachi Prism in the prize cards, but we would know exactly which one it was. This was extremely consistent and made for some fun, scary turns. And then I realised, well, this is fun, but in ADP it never really changed the amount of KOs you needed to win. So while it was flashy, it wasn't really too impactful. But then I thought, well, if it doesn't work in ADP, maybe you could just remove the ADP and just play Zacians and get to work. KOing a tag team for 3 prizes and then KOing a Dedenne for 3 prizes too seemed very possible. And I was right. Upon unleashing my combozation deck to the world ran with it, refining it, and it ended up becoming a fully fledged tier 1 archetype. So strong in fact, it got 3rd place at the Limitless Invitational in 2020 via Azul GG, and in the qualifier 4, the finals was a combozation mirror match. Not too bad considering it was first made by little old me. And when you consider Jirachi Prism came out in Celestial Storm, and then Oranguru didn't come out until Sword and Shield base. But right then, if you're feeling inspired and you want to play some Pokemon TCG too, well, thanks to Dragon Shield, I'm giving away this box of Dragon Shield sleeves and then this play mat too. All you have to do is like the video, subscribe, and comment below your favorite pet deck. A deck that you made all by yourself, and it doesn't have to be competitive. I just want to know what the deck was. Good luck to everyone, and I'll see you all next time.